Welcome to the first installment of a review of the basic punctuation functions that everybody needs to know. I am Mr. Tibbens, and this is going to be the first of 4 videos meant to help you sort of relearn and review the punctuation that you should have been learning basically from grades kindergarten through 12th grade. The first video here is just a quick introduction, let you know how this is going to go and what the intentions are. The second video is going to focus on the functions of commas. The third video will focus on the functions of semicolons. And the fourth video will focus on colons and the em dash, which should be used fairly rarely anyway. So with these videos, each one of them is essentially meant to work along with the PowerPoint document or the PDF document that was attached in the previous section of this hyperdoc. It might be smart for you to essentially have that document open so that you can flip back and forth between this video or between the videos and between that document. I will try to do a little bit of screen sharing to pull the slides up so that I can point out certain features of some of the rules and some of the sample sentences. And if I can get the technology to work along, I will also be doing a little bit of light annotating on those slides. All of this, the recording and distance learning in general is a little bit of a new thing for all of us. And so we're going to do the best we can to make the technology work for us. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The basic introduction here is to point out that punctuation does matter in a lot of ways, and maybe it doesn't matter in certain other ways, but it's one of the basic things that we all should know and be able to do at least the basics of for a couple of reasons. The first and most obvious, maybe most important reason to be solid, to be decent with your punctuation, is that it helps the reader to better understand your meaning. Punctuation functions as the road signs in your writing. So imagine that you're driving, whether you have your own car or you have driven along, you stole your parents' car for an hour and drove around the neighborhood, anything like that. Just imagine driving and thinking about how helpful all of the road signs are, the street lights, the stop signs, the lane markings on the road, etc. That is essentially what punctuation does in your writing. It tells readers when to go, when to stop. It tells them when to sort of speed up and slow down. It tells how certain ideas are connected and maybe how certain ideas are not. Now, assuming that you've driven a car, you've been in a car enough, most of us could probably go for a 10-minute drive without any significant problems. Even if you're a beginning driver, if you're careful, you watch the signs, you watch your surroundings, most of us don't feel any significant danger in a 10-minute drive. Now, what I want you to do is imagine what that drive would be like if all of the street signs, all of the traffic lights, all the lane markings, it was all removed. You're still going to go for the same drive for 10 minutes. It's still you. It's still the car. There's still other cars on the road. But now all the signs are missing. How's that go? Right? Most people would still tell you, I could probably get from point A to point B, but I'd have to slow down a lot. I'd stop a lot more often, maybe in places I don't actually need to. I'd always be sort of suspicious of the other cars on the road because I don't know if they're thinking what I'm thinking. It's very difficult to make sure that we're in agreement. Okay, that is essentially what writing without punctuation or with far too little punctuation does. If a person is really cautious and really careful and they read with intent and they're willing to do some rereading, they'll probably still figure out what you meant most of the time. Not always, but it's going to be okay, right? The problem is that most readers don't want to do that. Okay, one of the first jobs of a good writer is to write clearly, directly, and accurately so that the reader understands you clearly, exactly, on their first try. The only time someone should ever have to reread something that you wrote is if it was so excellent, so incredible that they just want to read it again. Or maybe if that person isn't in your intended audience and so they're unfamiliar with some vocabulary or something like that. But if you're targeting your audience well, and if your audience reads what you've written and they don't exactly understand, that's your fault most of the time. Punctuation is one of the tools we have to reduce that kind of confusion, those kinds of problems. Okay, so having too little punctuation can be a problem. But if we have a sympathetic or motivated reader, we might still get by okay. Now, That's not what most people do, though. Most people don't underpunctuate substantially. What most people do is they actually continue to punctuate at what they think is the appropriate rate, and just do it with less than 100% accuracy. For being honest, most people are way less than 100%. So now I want you to imagine that you're back in your car. You're going to take that same 10-minute drive. It's you, same car, going the same place, still other cars on the road. But now instead of having no road signs, no, traffic lights, etc., I want you to imagine that all of those same signs are there. All the street lights, all the lane markings, everything's there, but it's all in the wrong place, or most of it's in the wrong place. Here and there, you get a stop sign where you should, but sometimes you have markings that tell you to go when you shouldn't have, that tell you to drive, way too fast through that neighborhood, things like that. Imagine going on the 10-minute drive with a significant portion of all the road signs and markings in the wrong place. Now, what's the likelihood you get from point A to point B safely? The reality is that now most of us aren't going to arrive at our destination, or if we do, or we're going to have some bumps and scrapes on the car, or it's going to take us way, way, way longer than it ever should have. That 10-minute drive just turned into 30, 40, maybe 60 minutes. That is the problem that a lot of us run into with our writing when we're using punctuation incorrectly. What we're doing is telling the reader that this is how certain ideas connect, this is how certain ideas stay apart, except we're misleading them. Okay. If you're going to use the punctuation, you need to know how to do that well. You need to be able to give the right indications to the reader so that as often as possible, they don't have to stop and think. They just cruise right along. They understand your meaning, and everyone's on the same page. Okay. So maybe not everyone in the world will agree with this statement, but I think for most people, most high school level writers, this is pretty safe advice. This also works relatively well for your SOLs, your SAT, essay, your AP exams, things like that. Not talking about being lazy or sloppy, but as a general rule, I would argue when in doubt, leave it out. It's usually better to under punctuate than to over punctuate incorrectly, unless you do have a general sense of the rules we're about to go over, and you're trying to apply them consistently, maybe with a few hiccups here and there. Okay. One of the real values of knowing the rules as we're about to review them is that it helps you to make purposeful decisions in your writing. When I put a comma, I know why I'm putting the comma there. And so even if we hit one of those random times when I'm actually wrong, I still can't be that wrong because I did it with the right intention. I was trying to create the right relationship for my reader. And so even if these pieces don't work exactly, right, I don't get every rule exact, but I'm pretty consistent, I'm pretty close, and I'm doing that almost all the time, I'm still not making bad decisions in the way maybe I was before when I didn't know these rules, or when I sort of hodgepodge together 20 different rules that other people told me. Okay. So the first and most important reason to know punctuation and to do it well is to make yourself a better writer. And what that really means is to help your reader to better understand your meaning. That's the most important thing we're going to do here. The second reason, and I'm sure there are more, but really this is the second of the top two. You punctuate well because it creates some ethos, it creates some credibility. Think about how many times you've read somebody, make a post on Twitter, on Facebook, they throw a caption on Instagram. As soon as you catch a few obvious misspellings, wrong word choice, or really bad punctuation, most people have the tendency to assume that the person who wrote it either didn't care and wasn't giving it any significant thought, or that person isn't that intelligent or isn't that educated. Now, sometimes those are unfair conclusions to draw, but the reality is that most of us do that, okay? Especially people who do have some education and do have some background in terms of learning some writing. You don't have to be a perfect writer to pass judgment on someone else. Think about how many times you've seen that kind of post online and you see something stupid, you go, oh, this idiot, right? Doesn't mean the person's actually an idiot. It just means that you identified a mistake in their writing that you think they shouldn't have made. You think they should be above that. Well, and one of the reasons we also want to learn punctuation is so that people don't judge us and our writing in that way. If you're applying for a job, you write a cover letter to go with your resume, it's going to be really, really important that you have clean writing. If not perfect, at least clean. You don't want to have obvious mistakes. You don't want to look like a person who's lacking in the basic intelligence or the basic education that might be required to get that job. even if it's a job that doesn't require a lot of writing, these are still the little indications that we can give people that we do have some communication skills, that we are careful, we pay attention to detail, that we're willing to revise and focus. So, we might argue that that's a little bit elitist. It may be. But even if that is an elitist kind of concept, it's one that can work for us if we put in a little bit of time and effort to learn the basic functions, the basic rules of the punctuation that we all use all the time. Okay. Now, over the next 3 short videos and the associated PowerPoint document that's been posted and some practice that's going to be linked in No Red Ink. I know, no one loves No Red Ink, but remember, No Red Ink is essentially a glorified worksheet. We could just upload, stack after stack of worksheets, right? It's the same thing. The problem is that on a worksheet, if you get it wrong, you don't know you got it wrong until someone checked it. And in this distance learning model, it's very difficult for your teachers to give very clear, direct, crisp feedback very quickly on things like worksheets, right? It's very difficult for you to write your answers down, then to scan, to put it back, to all that stuff's a mess. No Red Ink allows us to do this very nicely at distance. The other nice thing about No Red Ink is that it is adaptive and reflective of your work. So if you get something wrong, it makes you do extra practice because it knows that's a place where you need the help. A worksheet doesn't do that for you. It also, if you get a few things wrong as you're doing the practice, it will remind you of rules. It will give you hints and tips. It's trying to make sure that all of that practice, that drilling it of question after question after question, isn't just about wasting your time. They're trying to make sure that you have opportunities to see the rules, to get the review, to get some pointers along the way. Now, again, if we were doing this live in the classroom, we could maybe do a worksheet and you could raise your hand and ask the teacher. But that's not the setting we're in right now. And so the worksheets wouldn't provide any real feedback where No Red Ink can. Now, I'm going to create this so that checkpoints are enabled at the end of most of these sections. So for those of you who really do feel more confident in this, maybe some of you have done some of this same practice and prep recently before the writing SOL. That's fine. I understand that. The checkpoints are there so that you can skip through the earlier sections of the practice, go straight to the checkpoint, and prove that you know what you're doing. Just remember that if you're not getting the checkpoint questions right, it can take you a lot more time and it doesn't offer you quite the same level of assistance and support as you would have been getting if you did the actual practice modules. So the No Red Ink there is practice to help you to better understand and remember the rules we're going to review. The other thing is that, we all, teachers, students, administrators, we're all a little unclear on what's going to happen for the remainder of the school year in terms of our grading policies. And so at this point, no work is being graded, but we are supposed to provide feedback for students and we are supposed to record the results. It is entirely possible at some point in the near future, we're going to find out that some of this work will end up being graded, et cetera. And just so that we're all on the same page, most of the 11th grade English teachers have agreed that some sort of quiz or some sort of summative assessment about the punctuation work would be appropriate after doing all of this review. So that's probably an activity we're going to do anyway. The question is it going to count? Who knows? But for those of you who will only do these things because you're grade motivated, I guess there's a small chance this turns into a grade. The real reason to do this is because you have the time at home, you're off school, and you probably still want to learn something that's of use to you. Punctuation matters because it helps us to be better writers and it helps other people to have more respect for the things that we've written. Okay. So for whatever reason you choose to do this, we really do hope that you take it seriously, you watch the videos, you look through the notes, you do the practice in No Red Ink, and then that you're in steady communication with me or with your teacher with where you have questions or concerns. Okay. For the students who are watching this that have not been in my class, these rules might be a little bit different than how you learned this the first time. In the end, we should all arrive at the same sort of answers to the questions. We should have the same punctuation, the same places, but there are different ways to get there. So if your teacher explained this to you differently at some point, please, please, please don't think, oh, they got it wrong or Mr. Tibbens has it wrong. There's a lot of different ways to do this. When I first started teaching, I used worksheets and rules from a common grammar book that most teachers in Loudoun County have. And if I remember correctly, there's somewhere around 24 rules for commas. So first year teacher right out of college, I can do the punctuation. I taught it. I was enthusiastic. And after spending 2-3 weeks just on commas, going through 24 comma rules, people actually did worse on the quiz at the end of the unit than they did on the pre-assessment at the beginning. I couldn't figure it out for a while. And ultimately, I realized 24 rules is just too many, right? What we really need to do is target what are the most common, most important functions of the punctuation and just do that. So that's what we're going to do. I have devised 8 basic punctuation rules that cover pretty much, almost all the punctuation you'll really need. If you're not going to be a writer, a technical writer, an editor, if you're not going to work in publishing or journalism or something like that, then these rules are going to cover 95% or more of the punctuation you'll need in your life. And that other 5%, basically no one knows anyway. So we're going to do 8 rules with a bonus of dashes at the end. So we have 5 comma rules. Okay. We have 2 semicolon rules. We have 1 colon rule. And then I'm going to throw in dashes at the end. They're basically 2 ways to use dashes well. And they're really just duplicates of previous rules, but we do this to add emphasis or to create some variety in the writing. And we'll get to that when we get to it. So this is the end of that quick introduction. Okay, what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. We want to make you better writers. We want to use this time to review for something that everyone can use, that everyone will benefit from. And we want to try to do this in a way that's as efficient as possible. So at this point, we're done the first video, the quick introduction. Video 2 is going to be just about comma rules. So what you want to do right now is, or when you're ready for that next piece, is to pull up the attached notes and review the 5 comma rules, and then to watch the next video where I will explain those same rules. And again, if I can get the technology to play along, I'll give you a couple of quick pointers and do some highlighting on the screen. I hope you're enjoying the time at home and you're staying safe. If there's anything that I can do or your other teachers can do to help you out, just know that we're here for you and that we're looking forward to getting back to work and helping you to learn and improve. All right. See you later.